Nick Padlo, CEO of Sophros Recovery.
Can you tell me about your own mental health journey?
Yeah, so kind of starting back, I grew up in Jacksonville, Florida, had a really good childhood, went to West Point for undergrad, and I spent my 20s in the Army between Afghanistan and Iraq. And got out, went to business school, started a business. Like things were going pretty well, and I don't think I really listened to or felt my emotions a lot growing up, and I guess in part because I didn't really have that many things that I was upset about. And as I kind of got into my 30s, life kind of became lifey, and so started struggling a little bit with depression and anxiety. And for me, coming out of the army, one of the things that I had, picked up this habit of drinking. As the emotions and the feelings got more, I leaned more on that for, to cope with the negative emotions, because I didn't really have other tools. And so, over time, as it tends to do, alcohol and drugs later, they worsen mental health conditions. And so my depression was getting worse. My anxiety was getting worse. I was drinking more because they were worse, and the spiral just kind of started. And so for me, it got to the point where I was done. I was ready to take my own life, and thankfully that day I decided instead to get help. And it's been a journey since, and I can talk about some of that too. But
Yeah.
it's certainly a lot better now.
Yeah, how does telling your story help your own healing process?
Yeah, so I first learned this in rehab, with this group therapy concept, right? And, you think about it and it doesn't make a whole lot of sense as to like how that's going to be helpful, how it's going to be helpful to, tell people all the things that I've been through. But what I've found is, the same concept in group therapy and with this is that, as we start to tell our story, as we start to be open and honest, one, we get it off our shoulders a little bit and we start to put that weight down. And two, we hear other people's stories, right? So somebody's going to hear this and maybe they'll hear a little bit of their story in mine. And so when you start to hear other people's stories, you realize that you're not alone, and you start to realize that like it certainly can and does get better. It's when someone who hasn't struggled tells you that it's going to get better or things aren't that bad, it doesn't feel very helpful. But when you see someone who's been through some of the same things that you've been through, potentially worse, and they are now doing better, that starts to give it started to give me that little glimmer of hope that like things could change, things could be better.
What inspired you to get into the mental health field?
Yeah, I mean, I think twofold. One is because, I'm an entrepreneur, and I've always felt that for me anyway, as an entrepreneur, it's easier for me to see solutions and see problems in places where I'm familiar. And there's nowhere more intimately familiar to you, than this if you've gone through this journey, right? It kind of hits a very like visceral part of your soul, right? And so you start to see things and you're like, wow, I bet we could do that better. So I think that was the first part. And then the second part was, it's one of the things that helps keep me sober. It helps keep me mentally fit because throughout the day, I'm dealing with situations and, helping people that are going through some of the same stuff. And it's a kind of a reminder for me of how important it is for me to do my own work. Like my work at the office isn't my own work, and that's something I learned early on. I still have to do my own work, but it kind of living in this and like being in this 24/7 certainly helps me to kind of work my own program. It's in Alcoholics Anonymous. The 12th step is all about helping other people, right? And it's not just because that's a nice thing to do. It's because once you have gotten at some point into recovery, that becomes our work, right? That's what helps me these days, is being involved. And so those are kind of the main reasons why I do it.
For you, what is it like helping others?
I mean, I think I see a lot of myself, in the other people that are struggling, and it gives me a sense of purpose. One of the things coming out of the army, and I think a lot of people that come out of the military struggle with, is like finding your sense of purpose in the civilian world. In the army, we have these core values of leadership, duty, respect, selfless service, honor, integrity, personal courage. And so you have this list, and like these are the values that you adhere to. And like, in some sense, there are values, but they're really the Army's values, right? And we've adopted them and we've made them our own, and you're so deep into that culture that I identified with myself as a soldier. And like that was like my mission, my values. And then when I got out of the military, I think there was a period where I was like, well, what am I doing now and why does it matter? Right? What does it matter? And so, you know, so often we go from this kind of purpose driven job, or at least we feel it's purpose driven, to like selling widgets or like helping a business be profitable, right? And the problem with that is that it just doesn't feel fulfilling. And I think that in order to maintain good mental health and in order to, for me, maintain sobriety, it's so important for me to have a mission, for me to have a purpose in life, right? And so that fulfills my purpose. And like, you could talk about kind of like it's like this hole in our life that, we can fill with alcohol and drugs, or we can fill with something meaningful. And when we fill it with something meaningful, like to me, that helps my mental health. Like that helps me stay healthy. And so, yes, I guess it's like, it's selfless in a way because we're helping other people, but it's also selfish, and that's okay. Like, because it helps me too.
Can you tell me a little bit about your centers?
Yeah. So, we started Sophros Recovery about 3 years ago, and we are an addiction and mental health treatment center. And so we don't provide rehab, so we're not inpatient, but we're one level below that. So our clients are with us anywhere from 3 to 6 hours a day, with a goal of really building a toolkit to be successful and sober for like all the things that life throws at us, right? Whether that's relationships or trauma, depression, anxiety, and one of the things that I think is a little different is, a lot of places focus very heavy on the abstinence side, tools and tricks to stay sober, and that's good. We need those. But it can also be kind of like trimming weeds in your front yard. We can keep it down. We can keep the weeds out, right? You can. If you work hard enough, you can keep the weeds out of your front yard with scissors, right? But unless you get to the root, they're just going to keep coming back. And so, I think one of the things that makes us different is we really focus on, how do we develop the tools and skills to be more mentally healthy, to have that solid mental health where we don't feel the need to go back to our old behaviors.
Have you seen the people you work with confidence level rise as they go through the journey?
I mean, you could see it in a picture. It's like, you don't even need to talk to them, right, to see it. I mean, I've still got my before and after rehab picture of myself, right? And I look at it sometimes and it's like, if you were to show those two pictures to someone, you say, hey, which one's more confident? They would like laugh. It's just so obvious, right? And it's amazing to see, in the rooms they have the 9 step promises, which are, this kind of series of things that'll happen if we start to, work our own program. And, it's that fear starts to disappear. They talk about the fear of, economic insecurity and the way we treat other people and like our interactions and like, all of the confidence comes back both in our physical health and our mental health and our, like the way we present ourselves. People are really different, and it doesn't have to be our program. It's like when people decide that they're going to make a change in their life and they work a program, whether they're struggling with substances or whether they're just struggling with mental health, like when we start to work a program and we get diligent about that, even on days when we don't want to, it starts to really make a difference in our life and how we show up.
For me, I live with bipolar disorder too. And the thing that helps me the most is hearing other people going through just similar things, any mental health issue. How important is it to have that relatability or lived experience to help others?
I truly don't think we can do this alone. I
Yeah.
can't. Some people may be able to go through life alone and like be fine, right? But I think for those of us that struggle with mental health and or substance use, like, you know, we always say the opposite of addiction is connection, right? And I think that that's we say that because that's what we struggle with. But I think the same thing applies with mental health. You know, it just there's probably not as catchy of a term, right? Like the opposite of struggling with mental health is a connection. You know, it doesn't sound as good, but I think that you know it takes away some of the weight and gravity of what we're dealing with, and we don't feel alone. And like it's just so much easier to I remember like in the army when we used to do exercises and you're outside and it's raining and it's cold or bad guys are trying to kill you, like it sucks, right? But there's something you take out of that by not being alone, right? The suffering isn't as bad for us because we're with our team or with other people that understand us. And I think a similar thing applies to mental health in that when we're going through this battle and when we're fighting and we can laugh about it and we can say, hey, I can say things in a room full of people like me that would sound so absurd to a lot of people. But in those rooms, people laugh because they all understand and they all get it. And there's no stigma attached. And I think it's just so important.
Yeah, with that relatability, what is it like working with veterans?
Oh, I love it. Right. It's funny. We all kind of get excited when we see each other just in any setting, the volume goes up and there's a certain level of camaraderie. I think one of the things that I challenge veterans to do is find this level of comfort that's not way over here and not way over here. And what I mean by that is, you know, we don't separate the veterans out and just put them by themselves all the time because they're going to be too comfortable, right? Those are our people, like too comfortable, but we also don't keep them completely mixed in the whole time because then they're too uncomfortable, right? So I want you to be comfortable enough to be able to be vulnerable and to share at times and to be able to like say things that are super relatable. And then I also want you to take that back and learn how to integrate with other people. So it's a kind of this mix of like, you know, I want you to be together and I also want to challenge you. Like I want to challenge you because when we go out into the world, like we're going to be with other people. So we've got to be able to do both. But I love it. Like veterans are pretty cool in the program because when they decide to do it, they're very mission driven. They're very focused, right? They don't always decide to do it, right? And they can put up a hard fight against, doing the work because we can also be hard headed. But when we decide to do it, it becomes like this mission, right? And you take this like, we had duty honor country at West Point. It's kind of like, duty honor recovery, right? It's like, that's my mission now and I'm going to do it. And then they do all the things. And like, like I said, when you do the things, most people are pretty successful.
What do you do to help your own mental health?
Yeah. So, I go to therapy. I spent 3 months in Cambodia, doing meditation and yoga full time after rehab. And, I still work with my teacher from there once a week. I meet with my sponsor twice a week. I go to 4 meetings a week. I try to go to the gym every day. It's like a lot, right? It's a lot of time and effort to keep me. Like it's like it's when I first started kind of trying to do more stuff and like going to more meetings and getting a sponsor, I was really resistant. I'm like, I don't have time for that. I'm a CEO. I've got a significant other. Like I don't have time to add more stuff into my schedule, right? And it's a very, I mean, it's kind of a valid excuse, I think. But what I've found is that I need that. I need a few meetings a week. I need to talk to my sponsor a couple times a week. I need to go to the gym and work out. And when I do that, I'm more effective in the other time. So it all balances out. I don't feel like I lose time overall. I feel like I gained that back by being a better version of me. And so, how long will I have to go to several meetings a week? I don't know, probably the rest of my life, but that's okay. How many people in society are able to say that they spend hours and hours a week working on themselves and getting better, and so that's a luxury that we have for those of us that struggle with, mental health or substance use. It's a luxury we have to get to work on ourselves that most people don't have. And I find that it just makes me human better.
What would you say to anyone going through a tough time?
I think the first thing to do is just pick up a phone and talk to somebody or talk to multiple somebodies. Um, and maybe professionals, right? Maybe a couple professional, mix in a couple people that either have been through it, have lived experience, or do this for a living, right? So if somebody calls our center and they're like, "Hey, I'm struggling with depression," and we say, "Okay, well, do you have any substance use issues? Are you using anything?" And they're like, "No, I'm just struggling with depression." It's like, okay, like we're not the place for you, but let's figure out who is and let's figure out how to get you help. And so by calling the wrong number, they still ended up getting to the right place, right? And I think hopefully most places would do something similar, and so, picking up the phone and calling somebody, I mean, like, it's very hard. It sounds very easy, pick up the phone, call somebody, but it's very hard. Like, we always say the phone weighs 1,000 pounds, when we're in that place, and it does. But take a step. It's like we don't feel like doing it. I know if you're struggling with mental health, the last thing you want to do is like go do something. At least for me, I had struggled like with everything when I was in depression. I was like struggling with brushing my teeth, you know. But we don't have to wait until it gets super bad to start reaching out, and use AI. Like, we're in an AI generation now, right? Like, go to ChatGPT and like be like, hey, here's the situation. What should I think about doing? And then take the advice. I think that's the next step. Is like ChatGPT is not going to tell you to like use him as your therapist, but it might give you ideas on like phone numbers to call and like things to think about as you navigate this journey.
Yeah, I didn't even think like that. AI can help when you need help.
Yeah, and it's like because your cognitive state might not be in a place where you're able to like do all the internet research and figure out who's appropriate and like all that stuff. Well, let it do all the internet research and tell you who to call. Then you just call less people, which is, should be a positive. If you're in that place, the idea of calling less people is good. You gotta call somebody, but call less.
Where do you want to see your mission, say, in the next 3 to 5 years?
That's a good question. So we started with one location in Jacksonville 3 years ago, 3.5 years ago. We opened up in Tampa 8 months ago. We now have a virtual program that serves the state. So we've been growing. I think for me, it's not about, how many locations can we build. There may be more, maybe one or two more. I don't know. But I think that what I would like to be is I would like to be the place that is synonymous with providing good help in Florida for people who are struggling. Like, that's what I want to be. I want to be the guy. When you think of inline skating, you think of rollerblades. Like when you think of like a place where you can go get well, I want you to think of us. Think of Sophros.
How can people reach out and learn more?
Easiest way is our website. So just sophrosrecovery.com, SOPHROS recovery.com. There's a phone number on there. You can call us. There's videos. Our YouTube channel's got a whole bunch of resources too. If you ever want to like, look at something on relationships or something on trauma or whatever, there's some really good segments that we've put on there. That can be a resource guide, and we're everywhere, Instagram, all the stuff. So, if you can type our name into Google, you can find us through a number of ways.